as the traditional and original owners and the Honourable Member for Murchison.
Mr President, I move that the Council do now adjourn for the purpose of discussing a matter of public importance, namely the circumstances surrounding the recent damage to the Cam River Bridge at Somerset and the resulting major delays to travel as a result of the reduction to one lane of traffic and concerns around the integrity of the bridge and the need for a reliable alternative route.
In accordance with Standing Order 33(3)(d), at least 3 members should rise in their seats to support the motion. The Honourable Member can proceed.
Thank you, Mr President. I thank members for their support. So, Mr President, raising this matter of public importance, I wish to acknowledge there are many people around Australia, predominantly parts of Victoria, New South Wales and of course here in Tasmania, that have been severely impacted by our recent floods. My thoughts are with those who have lost homes, livelihoods and sadly for some their lives have been lost as a result of this tragic and extreme weather event. This highlights why the bill we are currently dealing with later this week is very important, but not as important as getting on with addressing the very real threat that climate change is to the future of this planet. So, Mr President, I'd also like to note the work being done in challenging circumstances by divers in a still swollen river from floodwaters in a very strong tidal river mouth and working on site through assessing the bridge damage and preparing the formwork and pouring the concrete to try and shore up the Cam River Bridge. I also acknowledge the work of those traffic controllers controlling traffic in the wind and rain. It's not a pleasant job. And none of them deserve to be abused by drivers. I would like to make that point. I've urged people in my social media to be respectful and kind to those doing the best they can in very challenging circumstances. I do believe we need more traffic controllers. There's too many intersections that need controlling for the staff available. And as I'll get to it further in my contribution, Mr President, the whole of Somerset's been gridlocked 2 mornings in a row. Completely gridlocked. The peak times are not just 8 till 9. It's from 7 till 10:30 at least every morning on the western side and 2:30 till 6:30 on the eastern side in the afternoon. And also, before I describe the very real challenges we face on the northwest coast currently, I'd just like to inform members of where the Cam River and the bridge I'm referring to is, and then describe why this is such a problem. The Cam River estuary is located in Somerset, roughly halfway between the townships of Wynyard and Burnie. The northern part of the Cam River forms part of the boundary between the city of Burnie and Waratah-Wynyard local government areas. The Cam River Bridge crosses the river at the mouth of the river, and forms a critical link to all communities to the west of Burnie and the rest of Tasmania, or west of the Cam actually. The mouth of the Cam River has very strong tidal movements and is in quite a dangerous area, and we've sadly seen drownings in the past and many people needing rescuing. It is such a very dynamic river mouth. There have been calls from members of our community and members of local government for many years to ensure another reliable crossing was built, that is, a duplication of the existing bridge to ensure this critical link cannot be disrupted due to the volume of traffic that use this single bridge daily. I wish to speak specifically about the significant impact flood damage to the Cam River is causing the whole northwest coast, particularly west of Penguin. A population of about 43,000 people who use the bridge regularly, some many times a day. And this does not include all the traffic coming into the region to deliver essential supplies, health professionals, teachers, disability workers, etc. Mr President, this would not be such a major issue if the wait to cross the current one lane that remains open or on the visibly damaged bridge on the other lane where there is a visible sag in the bridge pavement and the concrete's cracked where is readily observable as you drive past. There have been up to 3 hours wait each way with traffic backed up the eastern end to McDonald's in Burnie at about 7.5 kilometres and similar distances to the west, and I'll come to what happened yesterday and again today. Clearly, many residents are very concerned about the structural integrity of the bridge, as concrete is not generally a flexible material. The other very significant issue is the availability, or lack thereof, of an alternate route to get around the bridge. Noting that the trip from the road on the west of the Cam to the road on the east of the Cam is less than 5 minutes drive. It will take at least 1 hour 40 minutes to do this alternate route without any traffic on the road. And this includes going through Hellier Gorge, not an easy drive, it is very slow and it's very windy. There is little to no overtaking opportunities and is not suitable for large heavy vehicles. At night there is a large amount of wildlife on the road and thus travel speeds are reduced significantly. Last time I drove through in the night I couldn't go any faster than 50 kilometres an hour at most. So to give members some context, I have provided you all with some comparable examples. If major infrastructure damage occurred in major centres that required a similar diversion, you'll see I'll provide examples around Hobart, around Launceston. There the distances and the types of road, not quite as windy perhaps in some cases, that people in your areas would have had to drive to do the same sort of detour. Okay? So you'll note that from Hobart you'd have to drive up over the Bridgewater Bridge up to Milton Mowbray, across and come down the road down through mud walls, across the Tasman Bridge. If you were going down toward Franklin, you can see the route there that's been mapped out. I think my constituent who proactively did this, when I was thinking I must do this myself, and suddenly there it was. The constituent sent it to me. The other one around Launceston, you'd have to go out through Invermay, up through Lilydale, Labrina, out to Scottsdale and then back down through Springfield, Patersonia and Unamara. Absolutely knows, McIntyre knows exactly how far that is and how long it takes.
Long time.
Yeah, Launceston down to Campbelltown and then back inland through Cressy. Okay, that is the sort of bypass we're talking about, because there is no other bridge. So, Mr President, some of the heavy vehicles, including milk tankers, cannot safely use the alternate route, particularly as it's also suffered flood damage and there's a big washout under the road on Hellier Gorge that I drove past last weekend, not the one just gone, the one before that, just after the rain had occurred. And that washout is on the, as you're heading down or heading north, down into the river, it's on the left-hand side of the road as you're going down. You can't see it when you're coming down, so any vehicles coming down were on a very patchy bit of road that had been undermined. That has been marked out with witches' hats, but again reduces that area of road to one lane. So, Mr President, this has been a crisis for my community that has needed regular, accurate and timely updates of the reality of the situation, as many people have been held up in queues for over 2 hours, initially with no detail available. That is improving now, and I thank all the people that have been providing accurate information. I've been seeking to ensure that communication was contemporary, responsive to the questions being asked, respectful of people's ideas and solutions in a similar way that was required during the COVID outbreak in northwest Tasmania. That's the level of activity this crisis has created in the northwest for people. Mr President, many locals have been feeling vulnerable and uncertain. Women who are pregnant and about due to give birth who live on the west side of the Cam River. Those needing daily cancer treatments who live on the west side of the Cam River. Those relying on disability support where their care providers live on the opposite side of the river, whichever side that is. Those health professionals whose workplace is the opposite side of the river. Those with perishable goods from west of the river, such as milk. The total reliance on this bridge to get thousands of dollars worth of produce out of the Circular Head and Waratah Wynyard region to provide food and other products such as wood to end users and other external markets. These people are all very concerned. All needed much more and much clearer information and advice than was being provided initially. Mr President, I know that many businesses along the route have also been significantly impacted. Those who've driven along here might know of Young's Veggie Shed. Young's Veggie Shed is on the highway. It's on the eastern side of the bridge. It's always busy. I shop there a lot myself. The owner rang me yesterday to say they're going to probably have to throw out a whole heap of fresh produce because it's going to be wasted. Because people just aren't stopping. People don't want to get out of the queue. Sadly, people aren't letting others back into the queue very readily. He also made the offer of having portaloos in his car park because there are no toilets on this side of the bridge. On the Somerset side, the Ampol service station there have offered the use of their toilets for anyone who's held up in the line. But that means having to get out of the line to go to it. Okay, it's on the opposite side of the road driving in, and it isn't recommended that people either stop in the line and pop over to the service station. You're crossing the major road, or that you actually, if you can pull off to the side, but you've still got to cross the road to go to the toilet. But I understand how vital this is for families with children who can't wait, older people often, and those with other urinary challenges or other even bowel challenges. Okay, this is a very real problem for so many people. So I know that, as I said, Mr President, the communication has improved of late, but almost all North West Road users that know that the government and the state government absolutely did not understand or appreciate the actual volume of traffic and the traffic tasks that this critical link relies on. The Minister was soon to withdraw his position from State Growth Hobart-based people. One can only assume, no doubt, that the maximum wait time, this is what he told me on Friday when they were planning for the following week, this week, the maximum wait time of 30 minutes could be expected at peak times on Monday. Okay, I'm not sure who told him that or why they would possibly say that when all evidence pointed to a maximum wait time of probably 2.5 hours during peak time. And that was what the experience was on Friday. I had school bus operators contacting me with that very story. Bus loads full of kids, 2 hours plus waiting in line to get across the bridge, and normal commuters as well. So, Mr President, I encourage members, if they want to look at Google Maps during the peak times. I had a look just before I came in for the debate here now, and it has eased the congestion, but you can follow that on Google Maps and see how far back the traffic is backed up. And not just along the Bass Highway, all in Somerset. You can see in all the streets of Somerset. Mr President, and that really impacts the residents who live there who are not even wanting to cross the bridge. They can't even get out to go the other way easily. So, Mr President, vehicles yesterday were backed up to Wynyard on the eastern side during this period. Commencing the peak travel time was around, I'd say, 7:30 to 8 o'clock, a much longer peak time than the government had anticipated. And they were still backed up that far. Vehicles and other trucks and everything were backed up to Wynyard, to the Wynyard turn-off there near Doctors Rocks and further back, still at 10:30am. Okay, that's how long it was taking to clear. Still that far back.
And even people who don't want to go across the bridge, they can't get to where they want on that side.
That's right.
They're blocked. Yeah,
they're blocked, yeah. And we're urging people to keep well to the left so emergency vehicles can get through. Yeah. But it still doesn't mean that I, wanting to go into Somerset to shop, should just nick through there and in case an emergency vehicle's coming the other way. When I crossed this last weekend on my way here, an emergency vehicle, an ambulance did come through with lights and sirens. Okay, they had priority access as they should. But it just means you can't be having people pull out to try even just turn across.
Even people have childcare services on one side, trying to get children across to there, it's not possible.
And they're working on the other side. I'll come to a couple of those, just a brief couple of stories, but yeah, it just is very disruptive. So, Mr President, as I said, the whole of Somerset became gridlock yesterday and again today, again this morning. With traffic being diverted off the Murchison Highway. The Murchison Highway brings traffic down from Yolla, Elliot, down the west side of the Cam River, and then they, depending on which way they're going, whether they're going west into Wynyard or going right east into Burnie, they cross the Cam. So all the traffic that was being diverted there, even traffic going west, not wanting to cross the bridge, has been backed up. They diverted them off the Murchison to allow a priority route for buses. That's an excellent idea. They've diverted them across Backham Road, down Bread and Butter Hill, into Falmouth Street, which is where the traffic lights are at the bottom, which are quite close to the bridge. And it was gridlocked all the way back up to the Murchison, including up the Murchison Highway. That's how far it was backed up, which meant Policia Street coming in from the west and Rag Street and every other street coming in from there was gridlocked. People sat in that queue for an hour and did not move an inch. Did not move an inch. Some people told me they moved 2 car lengths in that time. Some of them were just trying to get to Somerset. So the main reason I can determine that this seemed to have failed to alleviate the problem, absolutely essential and right idea of the government to create a priority route for buses. The police had to go through and drag the buses through, basically, or make way for the buses to be pulled through from the west to get school kids to school. And so they took them through a priority route through the town, effectively, through the town of Somerset, and then they had to go across Falmouth Street, which is gridlocked to the extreme, and then they had to turn right into Falmouth and back into Rag Street to get out to the Murchison Highway to get priority over the bridge. Okay, so the reason it wasn't working is because we had no people controlling the traffic at the Falmouth Street intersection with Bass Highway, where the traffic lights are. They were relying on the traffic lights initially. Never going to work. I know the Minister identified this as a challenge too when he was up there on the weekend. But we also needed traffic control where the buses had to cross Falmouth Street. There was no one there. Okay, I've got pictures of all this that my constituents were that live in the area were taking photos and sending them to me. So it's all accurate representation. This is not an exaggeration. This is the reality. And so I understand there were 8 traffic controllers put on into the system there. That is nowhere near enough. And they were only there intermittently from time to time. This morning I was told there was a traffic controller on the Falmouth Street, Falmouth and Bass Highway intersection there where the traffic lights are at about 7. They were not there at 8. The traffic cleared a bit while they were there, managing the traffic from Falmouth Street. But why weren't they there at 8? Now, I sent these messages to the Minister about this, saying this is actually what's happening. He's indicating in his messages to me that they are there. And I said, well, these people who are reporting this to me are not lying to me. They're not people exaggerating. There are people actually experiencing this. So we need more traffic controllers there until this bridge is open on both lanes. Even then, I accept it will be quite slow, but most of us are used to the kiwi crawl, as we affectionately call it. So, Mr President, I did contact the Minister yesterday and again today to report what my eyes on the ground were telling me, and there are plenty of them, and I understand action was taken to make sure there were traffic controllers put in place, but there's just not enough, and there's not enough on enough intersections. I do sincerely thank my constituents for being very proactive and trying to find solutions to the problems, and very real and workable solutions, many of which I've passed along to the Minister. I know that they are being considered. Some of them perhaps don't work for a variety of other reasons beyond the immediate, but we need all heads thinking here. Another matter that does require local knowledge and intel, but I did think would not need to be stated as the understanding of traffic flows at different times of the day. It would come as, or should come as, no surprise to anyone that there is a greater volume of traffic travelling east toward Burnie in the morning and travelling west toward Wynyard in the afternoon. Okay, there's going to be traffic going each way all day, every day. But logic would tell you, and anyone who's experienced the kiwi crawl can tell you, that's how it works. It's a really slow in the morning going east, very slow in the afternoon, evening going west. The kiwi crawl is a pinch point in our road there. This happens in normal, everyday conditions. So it seems this has not been understood, as we have significantly lower traffic build-up on the eastern side of the bridge to the west, heaps more right back to Wynyard, as I said, and not so much, nowhere near as much on the eastern side of the bridge. The Minister suggested to me this has been corrected. It isn't, because I've had people saying they're counting the cars they're being let through. You need to let far more cars through in the morning travelling east than you do travelling west to try and ease that congestion and try and free up Somerset a bit, and the opposite way around in the afternoon. Mr President, I certainly appreciate the need for accurate and consistent advice, but the absence of frequent communication from those in charge, rumours abound and fear and uncertainty can be exacerbated. So it is really important that we have factual and accurate information going out there. And sadly, that sometimes it gets, a rumour gets away and it takes a while to damp it down. I was told by many people on Friday that the bridge was going to close at 10 p.m. and that was it. So I did contact the Minister and say, look, I'm sure this is not right, can you confirm? And he did straight away, which I appreciate. But yeah, then I had to go and check in all the places that have been said to say, no, it's not, you'll still be able to get through. But this is what happens. So, Mr President, during this time I've been working very closely with the community, informing the relevant ministers of the reality on the ground, and some of their advice from those I assume outside the region has been fundamentally wrong, and thus I've had to call them again to correct the information they've received and pass on suggestions and the reality of the situation. Just two examples, Mr President, to see how frustrating this has been. Minister Ferguson assured me, this is on Friday, that the department had told him there would be a maximum of a 30-minute wait to cross the bridge at peak times being Wednesdays, weekdays, and one would assume that he was considering that to be about 7:30 to 9 a.m, with just the workers going to work and the school kids. And again at 2:30 p.m. to 6 p.m, predominantly workers and heavy vehicles and travelling and school children travelling in opposite directions predominantly. And Mr President, this was so far from the lived experience of most communities on Friday, and it has been again on Monday and today. And it was much more than half an hour for most commuters on Saturday and Sunday. Now, I do admit that the Burnie team was on Sunday, and that would have also added to the problem.
Faster to walk.
Well, some people did. Some people did end up leaving their cars in Somerset and running to school, you know, across the bridge and to Burnie High, place like that. But you can't do that with primary school kids. So, Mr President, I said this was so far from lived experience for most commuters. Very early in the day and quite late at night, wait times are indeed far less, and some people are only waiting a matter of a few minutes. But the suggestion that 30-minute wait at peak time was far from reality. That's since been revised to 45 minutes. Again, the lived reality is far from that. I had calls from school bus operators sitting in the queues for over 2.5 hours with a busload of children. I've had many messages across these days of 2 to 3 hour waits at peak times. Even on a Saturday, a non-peak day at midday, non-peak time, it took me exactly 1 hour to get through. Once I joined the queue, an hour to get through. I joined the queue, for those who know the area around Austin's Caravans area. My constituents are regularly updating me with travel times, and it's patently clear that the peak times are not limited to a couple of hours in the morning and afternoon, evening. And even around midday, vehicles were still being backed up for kilometres with waits over an hour. They were common right through till after 6 p.m. and significantly later. So even with the revised advice stating expected delays of 45 minutes during peak time, that's clearly fundamentally well short of the reality. And this is what upsets North West coasters, Mr President, advice coming out of Hobart with no actual awareness of the reality. The second example I'd just like to give you was when I called Minister Jensch. Now, Minister Jensch had been on the mainland at the Environment Ministers' meeting, and I knew that. And I called him to discuss the matters that were raised when they related to access to education, especially for Year 10, 11 and 12 students. Year 10 students at Burnie High having exams this week. And the Year 12 students going to, Year 11 and 12, sorry, going to Hellyer College, Morris College, have final preparation for exams this week, really important period. These are the kids who have been severely impacted by COVID interruptions, and they've got exams starting soon, the Year 11 and 12 students. And also there were some issues raised about the younger children need to be on buses for up to 3 hours and not being able to get home at a reasonable hour. So Minister Jens listened and agreed we need to address this, but then he said, this is on Friday last week, well, it hasn't been a problem today. Friday's been a people-free day. I couldn't believe this was the advice I was getting from him. I assumed it had to have come from Hobart and his advisors down here, because I informed him that, yes, indeed, it might have been a people-free day in Hobart after the Hobart show. It sure as hell wasn't on the northwest coast. Why am I telling you there are buses full of school kids 2 hours in the line and it's Friday? This is what upsets the northwest coasters, Mr. President. Anyway, you can only imagine that I was just about my head blew off at that point. It certainly was not a people-free day on Friday on the northwest coast. So, Mr. President, even with the recent advice, I said, the 45 minutes, we need to be realistic about that and tell people the truth. It's likely to take them 2 hours in peak hour at least to get over the bridge. And if they want to take the alternate route through Hellier Gorge, it'll take about that time as well. A much harder drive, and some of them simply don't have the money for the fuel to pay for it. You think about that, how much fuel they will use to go up and down that road every day for a week. They don't have the money, some of these people, to pay for it. So in light of one other thing I'll talk about, people giving advice from afar. I had a message this morning from a nurse who lives west of the Cam River, who works at the Northwest Regional Hospital. And she actually contacted the ANMF. I assume they were in Launceston, and she was asking what rights nurses have if they need leave. And they suggested that she asked to work at the Mersey Community Hospital instead of the Northwest Regional Hospital.
No, really?
Correct.
That's Launceston.
Yeah, correct. And this is why I bang on, Mr. President, about people actually understanding some of the very real challenges we have in our region. And I know that Member McIntyre would not disagree with some of this in terms of this sort of absolute separation of reality between our regions, my electorate, and Hobart, where some of these decisions are made. So, Mr. President, in light of these at times unhelpful and inaccurate assessments, I've continually sought to correct misunderstandings and provide accurate updates to my community and to the Minister and the Premier and the relevant ministers. We do need to work collaboratively. I've had a very proactive working relationship during this time with both the Burnie City Council and Waratah Wynyard Council mayors and GMs, and even to the point of having their engineers ring me to update me on matters related to potential alternate routes. I've been proactive in talking to some of the other landowners whose properties may need to be accessed if the bridge doesn't survive the repairs. Okay? I mean, the concrete was poured last night around the pier that's damaged. I don't know if they're going to actually try and prop up the dip in the bridge. It's visible and obvious when you drive over it. But they've got to stress test it and weight test it. There will be doubles go over this. There are fully loaded milk tankers go over this. Bus loads full of children go over this. So we're really hopeful that we don't need to close it, obviously. But if we have significant heavy rain, which thankfully hasn't come yet, this could cause further damage. As I said, it's a very dynamic river mouth with very strong currents. And the works on the new bridge that's there to replace, and I don't want to hear from the leader particularly or the great work the government are doing on building a new bridge, so we can just get over it. I want to hear about how we're going to look to this in the future as well if the leader chooses to speak on this MPI. But I've been talking to some private landowners about where alternate routes could go that wouldn't take the whole time to get around the Hellier Gorge. That might be a little bit less challenging and save a bit of fuel if we have to. Because we can't wait till it happens, we've got to have a plan in place. So, Mr. President, the reason I was particularly talking to the Burnie City Council and Waratah Wynyard Council mayors and GMs over the weekend was to understand the damage of Una Road. Now, Una Road is another link that's not so far back It is a narrow and again windy road, but that's had significant flood damage too, and significant landslips in the area. So I was asking the GMs about can that be promptly repaired? There was so much damage and the rain was continuing that the engineers couldn't get fully in there. I understand the engineers have now been in. It will take a major rebuild of that section of the road, so it's not an option in the short term either. And it possibly really isn't suitable for heavy vehicles because of the nature of it's a windy country road, effectively. So, Mr. President, I've been grateful for the local government representatives in communicating really freely with that. I did ask the Minister Ferguson if the road could be repaired in a fairly timely manner, that money be made available from the state to assist with that. And I understand that's been committed if it's possible. So that's a really positive thing too, so I appreciate that. I said that's what we've got a Treasurer's Reserve for, after all.
Get any federal funding? Would get federal funding?
Not for the Una Road.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm talking about repairing Una Road more quickly. That is a local government road.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, the federal funding is part of the Bass Highway, absolutely. Yeah, this section. Yep.
Have they been, do you know if they've been helpful?
I understand, I think it was the Premier who told me there had been discussions with the federal ministers and Prime Minister, I think, too, but it's alerted, I think, because he was here last week, I think, on Friday, wasn't he, in the state, down here. Yeah. So, Mr. President, I'm really grateful for the information that's been provided by them. I found it's been more difficult to get a really proactive response without questioning everything I'm saying to our state government representatives, because it seems that they're saying this is what's happening, this is actually what's happening on the ground, and they're saying, well, no, that's not right, because we've said people are there. Okay, I had a much better approach from the previous Premier during COVID, was very respectful and listening and responding and not disbelieving what was being told to them. And we actually need that approach now to actually believe what people are being told and look for real solutions to try and free up the traffic issue here. So, Mr. President, I will relate just a small number of personal challenges. The member for Mersey have alluded to some of the specific challenges being experienced. So those listening and other members can appreciate the real challenges of the 43,000 people, roughly, who live in this area. I had a phone call from a grandmother who was the carer for her brother. She lives in Ocean Vista on the eastern side of the bridge. Her daughter lives in Wynyard with her children and family there. So her daughter works at Toyota in Burnie, or in Cooey, which is just over the bridge. Okay, she has to start work at 8, and so she takes her children to her mother's place in Ocean Vista so she can be at work at 8 because there's no one else to look after the children in Wynyard. Her children go to Wynyard naturally because they live in Wynyard. The grandmother of the children then has carers come in the morning to look after her brother while she takes the children to school. One of those carers comes from Wynyard. Okay? And so the grandmother then has to take the children to school and then come back home so that she can take over the care of her brother, so the carer can go home again. Same thing in the afternoon. Try and think about the logistics of that. Another person's contacted me saying I'm losing work hours for next week as a disability worker. This person's a casual, as I cannot get from one client in Somerset at 9 a.m. to Burnie to start with another at 9:30. I'm just one person. Imagine how many people are losing wages in the next few weeks while this gets sorted. And also think about the people who are not getting the disability care they need because their carer lives on the other side of the bridge. Another one, my son is one of many people from the northwest that need to travel to Burnie for an important medical appointment. These people live in Circular Head. He had been meant to have it earlier, this appointment, but unfortunately his original appointment fell on the National Day of Mourning for the Queen. So the thought of a trip now that normally takes 1 hour, taking up to at least 3, with a child who is already so exhausted because of his medical issues, which may not seem like a big problem to some, but it will be one more issue and delay that impacts on those already struggling. We have already had 18 months battle with our medical system trying to get him help. We are now looking for another 6 months at least before we can get an appointment to see the paediatric neurologist in Hobart, unless we can convince people to send referrals to Melbourne as well. The waiting times are so ridiculous here in Tasmania at the moment, and most certainly not an easy wait when you see your child continue to deteriorate. Obviously, you can never predict these kinds of things happening. Mother Nature is powerful, but the response from the government so far has been a bit of a disappointment. I just hope we can begin to see the importance of a functioning second bridge. So, Mr. President, there are many, many accounts like that. I just wanted to read a couple just to give you a sort of taste of people, what people are actually experiencing. So people seeking medical treatment that is scheduled in the morning are actually trying to get accommodation in Burnie the night before. That means more out-of-pocket expenses for them. They don't qualify for PTAS, they don't live far enough away in distance. People from Burnie and surrounds needing accommodation in Wynyard to avoid missing flights from the Burnie-Wynyard airport. You can't, getting on a flight, it depends what time it is obviously, but you might need to leave the day before to get to the flight. A student coming back to school to Helier College from King Island arrives on the sharp flight, peak time. It has to be picked up by a staff member from Helier College to be brought to school. Okay? It's not just, these are the people on King Island are being affected. Okay? In another account, I read the son of a woman who was working in Burnie, the woman was working in Burnie, stated that he left his house in Melbourne for the airport at the same time his mum left Burnie. Okay, he's leaving his house to go to the airport to catch a plane to Wynyard. He arrived at their place in Somerset 30 minutes before her. Okay, that's the time it's taking to get across the bridge. Mr. President, I raise this matter as a matter of public importance as it affects a significant portion of our population. It directly impacts a region of our state where millions of dollars of economic benefit and growth come from toward our state. Much of this relies on timely transport of goods, including perishables. I've mentioned the milk. Many who have been providing advice to various ministers based on the information provided to me by the ministers show a real lack of understanding of the volume of traffic and goods on this previously existing bottleneck that locals have been asking for action on for years, stating that without action we would now see what we're seeing. Yes, I know, as I mentioned earlier, there is a new flood-proof or more flood-proof bridge being built alongside this one, which some are concerned may have actually contributed to the damage because some of the works went into the pier of the bridge, the existing bridge. That's a matter for another day. But any single bridge can be closed for many reasons other than a flood. Major crash, chemical spill, other non-flood related damage. This is a critical link for the northwest to the rest of Tasmania, the only viable link. We do need to be listened to and to continue to fight for critical infrastructure, which is what this is, including a second bridge, before discretionary infrastructure is considered and funded, such as a multi-million-dollar stadium. Members may be aware that I'm sponsoring a petition to Parliament on behalf of my community. It states the petition calls on the state government to 1. Conduct a thorough and open review into all issues surrounding the causes of the damage to the Cam River Bridge related to the heavy rainfalls and the concurrent construction of a replacement bridge. The subsequent repairs of and temporary closure of one lane of the Cam River Bridge at Somerset since Thursday 20 October 22, and to see publicly released information and findings of the reviews in a timely manner. 2. Retain the current Cam River Bridge until a full and proper analysis is undertaken to identify possible alternative routes across the Cam River to prevent this situation or other events that could result in closure of all or part of the Cam River Bridge happening again. And 3, ensure the process utilised to undertake a full and proper analysis to identify possible alternate routes includes direct and inclusive community and stakeholder engagement processes that assesses all options for another viable Canberra River crossing, including but not limited to A, retention of the current Canberra River Bridge after the new bridge is constructed, B, a second new bridge at the current or an alternative location, and C, upgrades of the current alternative routes such as Old Una Road. And Mr President, I know that the current bridge is past its use-by date really, that's what we've heard, that's why it's being replaced. So the option of repairing that and restoring that are probably not feasible, but we do need to see it replaced, not removed and not replaced. Okay, this is the crucial point here, or another really functional link that can take all this vehicle load, traffic load across the river. Mr President, I find we get better outcomes for our communities when we work together in times of crisis, as we did during COVID. And as such, we must continue to, as we address the current and sadly increasing risk and reality of severe weather events such as floods, bushfires, storms, etc. I do know that we can do this, and I urge the government to take an inclusive approach, one that engages other community leaders, the local councils, community service groups and organisations and business groups, as well as non-party elected members. We all care deeply about our communities and the welfare of our people that we represent. I must say I was disappointed that I had to request more than once to be updated at least as often as the media on important developments in this matter. I was being informed by the newspaper article, not proactively from the Minister or the government. That's disrespectful in the extreme. It was very frustrating to have to wait for a media announcement to see if the matters that I'd sought information about had been actioned and what decisions had been made on behalf of my community. As I said, Mr President, it's entirely disrespectful and in a community where we should be working together. The lines of communication have improved since then, thankfully, and I thank the Minister for being much more responsive and ensuring that I was getting information at the same time as the media, at least. The conversation to follow this event is just as important as the emergency actions being taken now. We and my community need a commitment from the government to future-proof our critical infrastructure, and the new bridge on its own will not achieve this. We need a dual carriageway plus 2 bridges or 4 lanes available over the Cam River. This is a critical link for the northwest of Tasmania to the rest of the state, and as we can see, if disrupted, causes traffic chaos well beyond what we have seen in other parts of the state. It is a major freight route. It is a vital link to health services, to education and to workplaces. Mr President, I will work with the government, of whatever colour, to see this matter progressed effectively for the community and the economic welfare of our whole state.